Hello and welcome to the peatlands. In the previous video we saw how to identify the degree of humification in peat. In this video we would like to look at how to differentiate between earthified and strongly earthified peat. Earthified horizons are only found at the soil surface and develop typically after soils are either slightly drained or a short time after deep drainage. Earthification is associated with vigorous biological activity in the soil. The peat is strongly decomposed. Generally, the von Post humification score is H10 or H9, though rarely H8 is also possible. Plant remains in the peat can only rarely be still discerned. Mostly this is not the case. In weakly earthified moist topsoil horizons, granular aggregates are first recognizable when the peat is carefully torn open. We call this a spongy granular structure. The aggregates are small, usually 1 to 10 mm, but predominantly bigger than 2 mm. When rubbed between the fingers, moist earthified material feels soft and creamy or soapy. If you rub your thumb over the peat in this condition, the traces of finger grooves can easily be observed in the rubbed material. Earthified material almost never dries completely in the field. When this happens, however, the aggregates tend to become blocky subangular. And, this is important, dry earthified peat produces only a very small amount of dusty material. Now let's move on to strongly earthified horizons. Strongly earthified horizons are also only found at the surface. These soils are typically found on sites which have been deeply drained for decades. The peat is very strongly decomposed with a humification degree of H10. In the peat, no plant remains can be discerned whatsoever. Strongly earthified peat is made up of rest structure, or rather of very fine blocky subangular or angular aggregates. The aggregates are really very small, predominantly less than 2 mm. In a wet or moist condition, the material is grainy smeary. You can feel small, hard aggregates between your fingers. The strongly earthified material feels rough, a bit like coarse coffee grounds. This consistency can be best felt on the sides of your fingers while rubbing them against each other. If you move your thumb over wet, strongly earthified material, the rough, grainy quality makes the peat flake. The tracks of your finger grooves are not visible or just barely visible. This is true also when the fine material is wet and sticks together. Strongly earthified horizons often dry out completely. In this condition, the peat is grainy dusty. Large amounts of dusty material are produced. This dust tends to stick to your hands. Completely dried organic material is hydrophobic. That is why strongly earthified horizons often have water repellent properties. Water simply rolls off the surface and the peat remains dry. Now we know how to differentiate between earthified and strongly earthified peat. There are two especially important criteria. First, the aggregate size, predominantly bigger or smaller than 2 mm. And second, the roughness in a moist or wet state. That's easy to remember. Here are all the distinguishing criteria at a glance. In the next and last video of this series, we will look at the tools and materials needed for surveying peat soil in the field. See you soon!